Gajananam bhutaganadisevitam kapitta jambhupalasara bhakshitam umasutam shoka vinasha karanam namami vigneshwara pada pankajam. Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaste and a hearty welcome to one and all for today's 18th session of our series aimed to lead us into an inward journey for discovery of inner strength and happiness. In short, Disha through Bhagavadgita. Friends, I hope every one of you have watched and enjoyed our special program on 13th July to celebrate and extend our respects and gratitude to all our gurus. On this occasion, our teacher, Dr. Timmappa Hegde sir, in his message, once again explained the importance of Panchamahayajna. From this, the relevant to Guru Purnima is the Brahma Yajna, which requires us to study the scriptures and also to discharge our runa to our gurus, who are instrumental in removing our ignorance, our ego, and guiding us in our journey to moksha. We can pay our runa to our gurus by providing them with material offering. Hence, Param Vedanta has a tradition to offer Guru Dakshina collectively from all of us to our gurus on Guru Purnima and Gita Jayanti. Those desirous of making a voluntary contribution may send it to Param Vedanta's bank account, details of which shall be displayed at the end of today's session and shall also be shared in our WhatsApp and Telegram groups. 100% of the contributions received towards Guru Dakshina shall be offered to all our gurus. Having said this, let me at the outset thank all those who have already very generously contributed. Coming to today's program, Dr. Timmappa Hegde sir shall give us an introduction to the day's topics. Dr. Rekha Kumar shall help us understand the glory and the means of knowledge from verses 25 to 34 of Bhagavadgita, chapter 4, Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga. She will also explain the information to direct experience dichotomy, which is Pratyaksha to Paroksha and Aparoksha Jnanam from Tattvabodha. After Dr. Rekha's presentation, Dr. Hegde sir shall highlight the important aspects which we should imprint in our minds. Do be attentive. Today's teaching quiz will be presented by Dr. Rupa, who has put this together along with Srimati Indumati Venkat. Srimati Mamata Shankar shall commence today's session by chanting and explaining Sri Satchidananda Shiva Bhinnava Narasimha Bharati Tirtha Mahaswami Kritam Kamalajadayitashtakam. Srimati Mamata Shankar, please.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. The first verse of the Kamalajadayitashtakam shloka, composed by 33rd Acharya of Sharada Peetham, Satchidananda Shiva Abhinava Narasimha Bharati Swami, goes like this. Shringakshma Bhrannivase Shukamukha Munibhis Sevyamanaangli Padme Swangachaya Vidhuta Mritakara Suraradvahaneva Savitri Shambhu Srinatha Mukhya Maravara Nikarair Modataf Pujyamane Vidyam Shuddhancha Buddhim Kamalajadayite Sattvaram Dehim Yam. Acharya is glorifying Saraswati in the first 3 lines of the shloka. The shloka, as explained by Swami Paramarthananda, the line that begins with Shringakshma Bhrannivase. Acharya says the Saraswati Devi residing in the Sringagiri Kshetra. The lotus feet of this Devi is worshipped by several sages like Shuka Muni and others. gist of the long poetical expression in portion of the second line of the shloka, Swanga Chaya Vidhutam Vritakara Surarad Vahane, is Saraswati Devi outshines both the moonlight, that is Amritakara in the verse, and Surarad Vahane, Airavatam, in her brightness, which signifies jnana. And also she is Vak Savitri, the generator of words, which is both knowledge and communication skill. The line that begins with Shambhu Srinatha Mukhya Maravara, Acharya says that groups of great devatas, including Vishnu and Shiva, Pujyamane, worship Saraswati. The attitude of worship is Modataha, happily with satisfaction and fulfillment. The last line of the verse, Vidyam Shuddhancha Buddhim, the Acharya is addressing Saraswati Devi as Kamalajadayitashtakam, that is consort of Brahma, the Kamalajaha. He is appealing to the Devi, Mahyam Dehi, you please give me wisdom, which is Buddhim, that includes Paravidya, Brahmavidya or self-knowledge also, and for that wisdom, you should give me a pure mind, Shuddham, and Sattvaram, that is immediately or instantaneously, and please fulfill my prayer. The central message of the shloka is, I have a special prayer for you, that is to Goddess Saraswati. I am a spiritual seeker and my primary goal of life is spiritual knowledge, which is Atma Vidya. Of course, I am ready to put forth whatever effort is required on my part. I understand mere prayer is not sufficient. I require your grace also. Vidyam Shuddhancha Buddhim Kamalajadayite Sattvaram Dehi Mahyam. Thank you, sir. Hari Om.
Thank you, Mamta, for introducing to us a very nice prayer, which Swamiji says is an important prayer for all students of Brahma Vidya. Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. We continue our study of Disha. We are now in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavadgita, which is Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga. Jnana Karma Sannyasa is the pinnacle of Karma Yoga. That means once a person gets spiritual knowledge, how does such a person conduct his life every day? Such a person does not make a distinction between religious activities and secular activities. His whole life or our life should be what is called a working spirituality. That means every activity that I do now becomes a yajna. What is a yajna? In today's class, Dr. Rekha will be describing what in the 12th chapter, in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Shri Krishna describes 12 forms of yajna. Yajna is a kind of an offering. And this offering is done out of gratefulness. Whatever activity that I do, can I make it as a dedication to the Lord? Among all the yajnas, you will see in today's class, so you will see the glory of what we do in these classes. All these classes are focused on jnana yoga, which in this chapter comes as jnana yajna, worship in the form of knowledge. And Shri Krishna says, every other form of a yajna gives jnana yogyata, and it is jnana yajna alone that gives us spiritual knowledge. And be sensitive to what Dr. Rekha is going to present. And the central message is, can I be very aware? Can I be very alert? Can I be a good listener? Can I be very sensitive to all that is happening? Working spirituality, or what is jnana karma sannyasa, is summarized in some verses of the Bhagavad Gita, which we need to remind ourselves. Mai sarvam idam protam sutre manigana eva. Shri Krishna or the divinity is pervading in and through everything. And that is why all my actions now will become a yajna. The Kenopanishad has a verse worth remembering. Tattvabodha viditam matam. I am speaking, you are listening. Who is the one who's listening? It is not your ears or your mind. Bear report to someone else, the sakshi, the witness. I'm able to speak. What is that strength that makes me speak? That is understood as, in every experience, can I become aware of that force, that experiencer. In the last class, we concluded with this beautiful mantra, Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavi, Brahmagno, Brahmanahutam. In every activity, in every instrument that I use, can I be able to see Brahman in and through all activity? And that is what will ultimately lead us to Brahman. In today's class, Dr. Rekha will be touching upon this essence of Advaita Vedanta, which Adi Shankara has presented in Ardha Shlokardena Pravakshami Yad Uktam Grantha Koti Bihi. What is spoken in crores of volumes of literature, I will give it to you in half a shloka, which is the essence of all Vedanta. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Napara. Now this is very difficult to accept and understand, and that is why our challenge is not easy. Shri Krishna, our Vedanta, is saying Brahman, that which I cannot see or experience, is the only reality. This world that I can tangibly feel and experience, including my body, is supposed to be mithya. And most third unbelievable fact, or difficult to believe, is that this individual, this limited individual with all forms of limitations, whose essential nature is none other than Brahman. Spiritual enlightenment is when you have a clear knowledge of this, that I am Brahman, I am the absolute reality. The world around me is a conditional reality available for me only when I am awake. When I am asleep, it disappears. When I'm in dream, I go into another world. And this knowledge now should become established in me, and that is what becomes enlightenment. Now, to go through that, there is a certain process. How does this knowledge from the teacher become an understanding to me? Knowledge takes place when I, the knower, in Sanskrit, the knower in me, there are two aspects in me. One is the consciousness in me, which is limitless. That consciousness uses this body-mind complex. This body-mind complex becomes now a limited knower. From the infinite, when I use my body-mind complex, I become the limited knower. In Sanskrit, the limited knower is called the pramata. Now, if I have to know anything, I have to use a means of knowledge. That means my mind and sense organs, which are known as pramanam. And the object that I want to know is called pranayam. When these three things come together, a certain knowledge comes. Brahma Vidya happens. And that knowledge that takes place is called prama. Now, for example, you see a person who's watching this wall. So when you look at the wall, the person who's looking at the wall is called the pramata. The instrument that you use to see, the eyes and the mind, are called the pramanam. The object of interest is called prameyam. And when these three things together happen, a thought modification happens. What I did not know before, now I know there is a wall in front of me. All these will be touched in detail today in today's class by Dr. Rekha. Over to you, Dr. Rekha.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Can I have the first slide, please? Before we enter the verses of chapter 4, 25 to 34, let's deal with the topic of the central message of Vedanta, which we should never lose sight of, and which can be understood, as we have already heard, as Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, Jivo Brahmaiva Na Paraha. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Brahman is absolute reality. The world is conditional reality. Jivo Brahmaiva na paraha. Jiva, I myself, am none other than Brahman. In the next slide, to understand the dichotomy between information and direct experience, we need to understand certain terms that are used in Tattvabodha. Basically, there are three types of jnanam or knowledge: Pratyaksha, Paroksha, and Aparoksha Jnanam. In the next slide, we see what Pratyaksha Jnanam is. And this can be explained by the law of knowledge, which states that I, the knower, the pramata, I use my sense organs, which are the instruments of knowing or pramanam, to see the object, prameya, to obtain knowledge or prama. So pramata plus pramanam plus prameyam generate prama, which is a thought modification. The next slide is a cartoon that depicts Pratyaksha Jnanam. So reading from right to left, I, the knower, the pramata, I use my eyes, the pramana, to see the object, prameya. And then I get the information that it is an apple, and that is prama. In the next slide, we deal with paroksha jnanam and aparoksha jnanam. Paroksha jnanam is indirect knowledge of objects that are remote. For example, the Arctic Ocean, which I read about, I see pictures of it, but I haven't seen it yet with my own eyes. The knowledge of the teaching, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, is similar. This is just information which appears remote, and there is no reference to me at all in this. On the other hand, aparoksha jnanam is knowledge of the teaching that Jivo Brahmaiva na paraha, which is Brahman is myself. Now, any knowledge where there is reference to myself is called aparoksha. When I refer to my status here, this is liberating knowledge. Thus, both paroksha and aparoksha are jnanam, but they differ in that one does not include me, that is paroksha, whereas the other one, aparoksha, does. The next slide depicts and reiterates that pratyaksha is knowledge of an object through the sense organs. I watch TV with my eyes, I hear music with my ears, I get the fragrance of flowers through my nose, etc. Paroksha is knowledge of an object beyond the reach of the sense organs, like Mount Kailash, which is very far away. And I read about it, I look at pictures, and this is before I make the trip. But when I stand in front of the north face, I have Pratyaksha Jnanam. Aparoksha Jnanam is knowledge of that which is non-different from me, like Aham Brahmasmi. Next slide, please. In fact, our Guru, Swami Paramarthananda, says that the process of spiritual enlightenment first requires exposure to the teaching of Vedanta from a Guru who makes the difference between paroksha and aparoksha very, very clear. When I dwell on this, I can displace my previous very limited worldview with the new Vedantic expansive worldview. And then I say that I have the knowledge and so I'm ever free. And this is what all spiritual seekers yearn to say one day. Next slide, please. Coming to chapter 4 of the Bhagavadgita, we have seen the greatness of the Gita and the Avatara Rahasyam of the Lord in verses 1 to 15. And this is the only chapter in the Bhagavad Gita where the topic of Avataram is dealt with. The main message of the chapter was given in verses 16 to 24, where we learned about jnana karma sannyasa, or renunciation of action through knowledge, or atma swarupa jnanam. It spoke about two kinds of renunciation. With verse 24, Lord Krishna concluded the topic of jnanam with a big leap in Vedantic teaching. From the first stage of Vedanta, where I see I as consciousness and see body, mind, and world as matter, that is Atma, Anatma, Viveka, or Dehi, Deha, Viveka, the leap is to the second stage of knowledge, which says that there is no world other than me, the observer. In verses 25 to 34, Lord Krishna talks about the glory of self-knowledge, or jnana stuti, by mentioning 12 spiritual sādhanās or yajñas. These are just examples, because several more are described in the Vedas. These spiritual practices can be called yajnas only when two criteria are met. One, Ishvara is involved, and two, the motive is spiritual growth. It cannot be material benefit or to improve my health. Even eating becomes a yajna when I offer the food to the Lord before eating it myself. All sadhanas are important, but except one, they can never give liberation directly. They give chitta shuddhi and prepare the mind for jnana. They are fruitful only when they culminate in jnana. Lord Krishna mentions jnana also as a yajna and calls it the greatest one because it is the only one that can give moksha. The other sadhanas are supportive, parampara moksha karanam, but jnana yajna is sakshat moksha karanam. Next slide, please. There are several routes for purification of the mind or chitta shuddhi, and we have a choice to use either one or a combination of several of them according to our own inclination. But we must not forget that there is no choice with regard to moksha, for which there is only one path, that of jnanam, which is considered the greatest yajna. And everyone has to come to jnanam for moksha. This is the main essence of verses 25 to 34. In the next slide, we see that in any yajna, there is a sacrificial fire, which can be real or symbolic, taken to be an understanding, but oblations are offered to the sacrificial fire. These oblations, when they are offered, they are destroyed in the fire. In the subsequent verses, this symbolism is applied when something is offered and subsequently destroyed, leading to purification of the mind in all sadhanas, except jnana, which leads to moksha. In the next slide, in verse 25, two yajnas are dealt with. The greatest one, jnana yajna, is described first. And Lord Krishna says that if jnana yajna is compared to a yajna, the fire is the paramatma or the higher self. And the oblation which is burnt is the lower self, the lower I, ego or ahankara. This is a cognitive change in understanding which is done by the Jivatma himself. It requires tremendous maturity, which we know as sadhana chatushtaya sampatti. The second yajna described is Deva Yajna, which is a Vedic ritual like Agnihotra, in which various devatas are invoked. In the next slide, in verse 26, two other yajnas are described. Dama Yajna, also called Indriya Samyamaha, Indriya Nigraha, or self-control of the sense organs by mastery. It's important it is mastery, it is not suppression. This is through discrimination and willing discipline. Again, it cannot be enforced. The oblation here are the wild, untamed sense organs that are offered to the fire of discipline. The next yajna is Vishaya Bhoga Yajna, which is different from Dama because it speaks not about mastery and reduction, but more about enjoyment of sense pleasures, but in a legitimate and moral way, keeping them under control with mastery. The oblations here are others and things which provide varieties of sensory stimuli like Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa and Gandha. In the next slide, verse 27 deals with Sama Yajna or Atma Samyama Yajñāḥa. Atma here means the mind and Samyama is discipline. This mental discipline is tougher than sensory discipline. With this, Lord Krishna says all the 10 sense organs, the Gnanendriyani and Karmendriyani, are disciplined. In the next slide, we see the 10 Dasha Indriyani, the 5 Gnanendriyani, as we mentioned before, the 5 organs of knowledge, Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, and the 5 Karmendriyani, which are the 5 organs of action, Vak, Pani, Pada, Payu, Upastha. The functions of all the 10 sense organs are destroyed in the fire of mental discipline. In the next slide, we have verse 28, which gives us 5 yajnas. DRAVYA yajna, which is dana or varieties of charity. TAPO yajna, which involves mastery of the sense organs by willful self-denial. Example is fasting, maunam, etc. Yoga yajna is the practice of Ashtanga Yoga, the eightfold discipline prescribed by Patanjali Rishi. Swadhyaya yajna is Parayanam of the scriptures, studying, learning to chant, Shabda Grahanam. Jnana yajna here is different from the self-knowledge which we spoke about earlier. This is more literal. It involves study of the meaning of the scriptures, inquiry, analysis, Artha Grahana. Next slide, please. The 11th yajna is Pranayama yajna. There are two parts to this verse. First, the oblation is expiration, prana, which is destroyed in inhalation, which is the fire, and vice versa. And the second part is holding the breath, stopping both inspiration and expiration by discipline, and this leads to quietness of the mind. The 12th yajna is Ahara Niyama yajna, where the quantity and quality of food are both controlled, converting sick pranas into healthy ones. Upavasa is a yajna. It's an Ahara Niyama. When I fast, I get more time for spiritual practice. I get closer to God. Lord Krishna speaks more about Ahara Niyama in chapters 6 and 17. Next slide, please. Lord Krishna says, Sarve Pete Yajna Vidaha. People who practice these 12 sadhanas are great sadhakas. Even if they practice only one or a combination of them, they are called dvija or twice born, versus those who lead a free licentious life. Remember, only the dvija can become ajaha Brahman. The effect of this is yajna kshapita kalmashaha. Kalmashaha are all the mental impurities that obstruct spiritual growth, such as kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya. And this includes prarabdha, papam, which also gets destroyed. Swami Chinmayananda famously said, start as an animal man, but become a man sooner or later. Practice these yajnas, and when you get self-knowledge, you are converted into a God-man. In the next two verses, Lord Krishna reaffirms that discipline is necessary for worldly happiness as well as for moksha. All the yajnas can be broadly classified into two, jnana yajna on one side and the several karma yogas on the other. Lord Krishna says, Stan sarvan karmajan vidhi. All the yajnas other than jnana yajna are born out of karma. Puja, japa, ashtanga yoga, etc. All of them are karma yajnas. One must remember that they are limited and that they can only purify the mind. Everyone has to come to jnana yajna to attain moksha. In the next slide, excuse me, in verse 33, Lord Krishna glorifies jnana yajna once again. The important thing to remember is that the karma yajnas are incomplete without jnana yajna, and that jnana yajna is impossible without the prior karma yajna. Swami Paramarthananda gives an example of how one must go sequentially from kindergarten to primary, middle and high school and then on to college. One can't jump directly to college, nor can one remain in kindergarten forever. Finally, all the karma phalam are included in the jnana phalam. Verse 34 gives us the means of acquiring jnana. Jnana yajna can be practiced only under the guidance of a Kshotriya Brahmanishta Guru, one who has both knowledge of the scriptures, is deeply established in the scriptures, is Brahmanishta, and also has communication skills, Kshotriya, like our Pujya Guru, Swami Paramarthananda. In turn, what is required of us as seekers? We need to have two qualifications. The first is jignasa, which is an intense desire for this knowledge. And the second is humility, vinaya, which is expressed by doing namaskara and seva to the Guru. The remaining verses of chapter 4 give the phalam of Jnana Karma Sannyasa. Thank you. Hari Om.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rekha. This was absolutely brilliant because these set of verses refer to various forms of yajñas, and you were able to summarize and bring out the essence of this set of verses. You also very nicely covered the Tattvabodha part of what is this Pratyaksha, Paroksha, and Aparoksha Jnanam. To emphasize something that you already said is about the significance of a yajna. As you already said, yajna can be two aspects. One is the traditional havan. Here, Sri Krishna talks about something more relevant in our daily life, is not that form of a ritual, but as a form of a sadhana where you dedicate all your activities so that they grow inwardly, they grow spiritually. Making karma yoga a way of life. Again, among all these 12 yajnas, the best form of yajna is jnana yajna, because this jnana yajna is the ultimate cause, the sakshat karanam of Brahma Vidya. All the others are supportive causes, or only which give jnana yogyata. Certainly without jnana yogyata, jnanam is not possible. I will dwell now on a topic which I was supposed to cover in the last class of Tattvabodha, which is talking about Shabda Pramanam. What is this Shabda Pramanam? When we want to get Brahma Jnanam, we will realize that we need a source of information, and all our teachers who have gained Brahma Vidya and who have been transmitting for generations have only words, either spoken or written words. Now, what we will try to understand is how we are able to get Brahma Jnanam through spoken or written words. To reiterate again, from a Brahma Jnanam concept, all of us are the Pramata. Pramata means the body-mind complex, the limited me, the spiritual seeker. The object that I want to get, the Pranayam, is Brahman. Slowly the teacher will say that Brahman is not apart from you. And I have to use a relevant pramanam, which is again which is the scriptures. We talk about two forms of knowledge. One is called the Paroksha Jnanam and the other is called the Aparoksha Jnanam. So a guru will have to systematically, verbally communicate both these, and by using Shabda Pramanam. Paroksha Jnanam, as described by Dr. Rekha already, is an indirect knowledge, knowledge about various objects which have been told to us in the scriptures. And Aparoksha Jnanam is what is told about the scriptures about myself. Any knowledge which comes about myself becomes Aparoksha Jnanam. What is enlightenment in this context? It is a very clear understanding, both the Paroksha aspect and the Aparoksha aspect of the Guru's teaching on Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha. Again, any knowledge from the scriptures which talk about anything else other than me comes under Paroksha Jnana. That knowledge which is about myself becomes Aparoksha Jnana. This is a common example given for a teacher who has knowledge and who wants to communicate, like a person who has experienced the taste of sugar. And let us hope the people whom he has to explain to have never in their lives seen sugar or tasted it. How do you ever communicate such an experience? These are again verses from the scriptures. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. Brahman is something which cannot be described by words, which cannot be understood by the mind, and therefore they are beyond speech and they are beyond mind. Therefore, how can Vedic or Vedanta Pramana, which is in the form of words only, still are capable of revealing that which cannot be revealed? Now, words have certain functions and words can reveal objects, those objects which are commonly available to everybody. For example, sun, water, trees, all of us are able to experience. And if I use a particular word for the sun and explain it to somebody, now it is possible through words to communicate something that is commonly experienced by everybody. Now, if there is an object which has a certain property, because of the property, I'm able to relate, I'm able to teach. If there is something which has a particular function, or if there is something because it is related to me in a particular way, I can explain how it is related through relationship. The problem is Brahman is not an object to be described. Second is Brahman is nirguna. There are no properties at all. Brahman does not do anything. Brahman does not do any function, and therefore Brahman is akarta. And Brahman cannot be related to anybody. To be related, there should be at least two, and Brahman is advayam. That means there are no two. And when there is no two, there is no question of relationship. Now, again, can you see the difficulty of a Brahma Vidya Acharya who has to use common words that we have to understand to describe Brahman, which is not an object, which has no attributes, which does not do anything, and which is advayam, or that means it cannot be related to in any way. So therefore, the teachers have to use a new style of communication, and this new style is brought out in one Upanishad called the Kenopanishad. In the Kenopanishad, the student begins to the teacher and says, Bhagwan, I'm able to see, I'm able to hear. What force is that, or what is that because of which I'm able to hear, I'm able to speak, I'm able to breathe, I'm able to talk? You know, what is that which makes it happen? So the teacher has to do it in a very indirect way. The teacher says, it is something which the speech cannot describe, as we already said. It cannot be understood by the mind. It is not something that can be seen. So the student gets a little confused. The teacher now makes it a little more confusing, but this is the way the teaching is done. The teacher now says, it is something other than the known, something other than the unknown. See, knowledge can be of two types. Something that I know, something that I do not know, which can be known at a certain period of time. So the teacher says it is something which comes under the domain of, it is not anything that is known, it is not anything that is unknown. Anya devatat viditat atho aviditat adihi. It is something other than the known, other than the unknown. The teacher is saying it is something unknowable as an object. So it is not something material at all. It is not an object. And the student slowly should infer, if it is not the object, then it must be the subject. Because what else can it be? The teacher has a very nice way of saying, and this verse has to be remembered and understood. In the Kenopanishad, the key verse is this: Tattvabodha viditam matam. In every experience, there is one common experiencer. The objects of my experience keep changing all the time. But there is one experiencer from my childhood until now who has never undergone any change. What is that which is constantly there? The teacher makes you aware of that. What is that? What is called Tattvabodha. In every knowledge, that common factor, that experiencer which is there in and through. Brahman can be revealed through the help of an apparent attribute. Now, this is again done in Kenopanishad. Now, what is that because of which I'm able to see? So now Brahman can be understood as the Sakshi. Now, to witness anything, you should have an object to be able to see. And this mithya prapancha is taken with reference to the mithya prapancha, that which I'm able to experience, that experiencer in me, the Sakshi principle, which is an apparent attribute, because Brahman has no attributes. But because of Brahman, I am able to experience everything. That Sakshi principle, the teachers say, is Brahman. Then there are some things called the incidental attributes. What is this incidental attributes? The Vedantic teachers give an example. Supposing you go to a colony where there are row houses, all of them looking identical, and you are supposed to identify and tell a person which is Devadatta's house. From a distance, everything looks the same, and how do I tell him which is that house? Fortunately, at that time, there is a bird, there is a crow sitting upon that house. So you see, can you see that house on which there is a crow sitting? That is Devadatta's house. Now, this is what is called an incidental attribute. Now, what is the incidental attribute in relation to my body? Now, body is taken as the incident. Now, my body is sentient. By sentient means I am conscious, I can experience, I can move. What is that force that makes me sentient? The teachers say, now that force that makes you sentient indirectly or incidentally is revealed as Brahman. Now, how do we reveal Brahman as no attribute? I'll give you an example. You have 5 glasses in front of you. There is one glass with coffee. The other glass has got some juice. The other glass has got water. There is one in which there is tender coconut water. But there is one glass or one tumbler which has nothing. And then I will tell you, can you give me that empty tumbler? Now the teachers try to tell you, any attribute that you see is not me. This is called neti neti. Mano buddhi hankara chittani nata. If you experience anything, this whole world of experience is not me. I experience my body. Now, is the body an object of my experience? So whatever I experience, I am not. I can experience my mind. Is my mind an object of my experience? Yes. Therefore, if there is some attribute, something that can be experienced, I keep eliminating and say, not me. So what have we seen? So through incidental, because of consciousness, because of no attributes, and then we said that Sakshi is an apparent attribute. Brahman can be seen because of the witnessing property. And finally, a master-student relationship is one of the highest forms of a relationship in which there is a very deep understanding and a form of a love relationship. When you are close to a person whom you relate to in a space of love, you will see often you don't have to say many things. Even without saying, may not be even without any body language also, sometimes you are able to communicate beyond words. Let me elaborate on a story which I have told many times, but I'm told, I've got a feedback that maybe I have not understood the significance of the story. This is a story of a master and a student, where the student feels that the master has not communicated everything, and he appeals to the teacher, see, I can see you there, I'm here. I feel that you have not communicated everything. A Brahma Vidya Acharya is very open. He would share whatever his understanding to his student. So the teacher confesses, I have shared everything that I possibly know. He says, come, let's go for a walk. As they walk, in the depths of their silence, the teacher is not speaking. The student is also not doing anything, but they feel the presence of each other. They are extremely aware. It is a very quiet path. Suddenly they heard a bird sing. And the teacher looks at the student and he breaks the silence and he says, did you hear that bird sing? The student says, yes. The teacher asks the student, have I hidden anything from you? The student says, no. The rest of it is non-verbal communication. the teacher wants us to be very sensitive, to be alert. And when you are alert, you not only hear the object, you become aware of the one because of which you are able to hear. It is not my ears, but that sakshi, that witness, that consciousness principle, and sometimes through maunam vyakya, through a non-verbal form of communication, the teacher is able to communicate. So therefore, it is now possible that the teacher will communicate. Why? Because Brahman, unlike that sugarcane example, or the sweetness of sugar cannot be explained, whereas Brahma Vidya can be communicated because Brahman experience is something I have all the time. All the time I am aware of myself. But I do not know that this awareness principle is what I need to be able to focus on. So the new definition of self-realization is dropping the desire to know the self with the knowledge that the self need not be realized because the self is evident in and through every experience. And that is the meaning of Tattvabodha viditam matam. When I shift my attention to that listener. Did you hear that bird sing? Yes, I did. Who heard it? Are you aware? That listener. And if I identify, and that is the pure consciousness. So you will see that beautiful Kenopanishad, which keeps on telling, see, yad vacha, that because of which speech happens, but that which cannot be explained by speech, that is the real Brahman. That faculty because of which I'm able to speak, even though that faculty cannot know Brahman. Remember that principle that allows me to speak, that principle that allows me to know, that mind in me. So remember, that is Brahman, and that is how the teachers through Kenopanishad style have a very indirect method of communicating. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. My tremendous gratefulness to Swami Paramarthananda for having brought out these very subtle understandings to tell us how he is able to communicate this very subtle teaching. As it is our practice now, we will have a teaching quiz to see what is that we have understood, and that will be conducted by Dr. Rupa. Dr. Rupa, please.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Today I would like to present the teaching quiz for the chapters for Bhagavadgita chapter 4 verses 25 to 34, and also the Tattvabodha part of the excellent presentation that we've heard from our previous speaker, Dr. Rekha, and also the excellent lecture given by our very own Guruji, Dr. Timmapai sir. I think and I hope that all of us were very alert and aware, so it will be very easy to answer these questions. Let us start with the first question here. What is information, direct experience, dichotomy? And the answer is getting the information first about the object, place, or person in the creation, and then converting that into direct experience by contacting the object is called information, direct experience, dichotomy. We had plenty of examples given by Dr. Rekha. Kindly try to rethink the examples, it will become much easier. Moving on to the next question. Can this technique be used to gain self-knowledge? The answer, no. This technique cannot be used to gain self-knowledge. Moving on to the next question. What is the method used to gain self-knowledge? The answer, Jnana Yoga, which consists of Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam, is the method used to gain self-knowledge. Next question. What is Pratyaksha Jnanam? The answer is knowledge gained by the means of using our sense organs is termed Pratyaksha Jnanam. Next question. What is aparoksha Jnanam? It is indirect knowledge. For example, while reading scriptures, we get knowledge that Brahman exists. This is aparoksha Jnana. Next question. What is aparoksha Jnana? And the answer is, it is direct knowledge or transcendental knowledge. Example, when we progress in our sadhana, we realize that I am Brahman. Here we do not use our sense organs, the mind, or the intellect. As Dr. Rekha said, wherever me or myself is included, again here, I am Brahman, where me or my is involved, then it becomes aparoksha Jnana. Next question. Moving on to Bhagavadgita chapter 4 verses 25 to 34. What does the word Daivam mean? And from the subjective viewpoint, what are the Devas? The answer, the word Deva comes from the Sanskrit verbal root div, meaning illumination. Subjectively viewed, the greatest Devas are the 5 sense organs. Eyes illumining forms and colors, ears illumining sounds, the nose illuminating smell, and the tongue and skin illuminating taste and touch respectively. Next question. What are the 12 yajnas or sacrifices mentioned in the 4th chapter? Answer, the 12 yajnas are Daiva Yajna, Brahma Yajna, Yajna of sense control, the Yajna of mind control, the Yajna of self-control, Dravya Yajna, Tapa Yajna, Yoga Yajna, Svadhyaya Yajna, Jnana Yajna, Pranayama Yajna, and Niyatahara Yajna. Next question. What is Dravya Yajna? The answer, Dravya Yajna is a sacrifice of wealth. To pursue this, a life of charity serving the world as best as we can with all that we possess, physically, mentally, and intellectually, is the noble sacrifice called Dravya Yajna. Next question. What is Svadhyaya Yajna? The answer, the daily deep study of the scriptures, which includes the art of introspection. For a seeker, Svadhyaya Yajna is a technique of estimating his own spiritual progress. And for a seer, sage or jnani, this will be for reveling in his own self. Next question. What is Jnana Yajna? The answer, Jnana Yajna is the activity in a man by which he renounces all his ignorance into the fire of knowledge, kindled by him in himself. This has 2 aspects, negation of the false and assertion of the real nature of the self. And these are effectively undertaken during the seeker's meditation. Next question. What is meditation? The answer, meditation is the path in which the ego learns to withdraw its false evaluations of itself in particular and of life in general, and comes to the final experience of its own divine nature. Next question. Jnana yajna is superior to dravya yajna. Why? Explain. The answer: ritualistic karmas produce results to enjoy. Therefore, action cannot be a complete fulfillment in itself. On the other hand, right knowledge, jnana, ends all karmas once and for all. Inasmuch as the deluded ego destroys itself in the light of self-knowledge. Since it is the jnana yajna that directly destroys ignorance and not dravya yajna, jnana yajna is superior to dravya yajna. Next question. How should one approach the Guru? The answer: the Guru should be approached by long prostration, by asking questions, and by serving the Guru. The wise, that is the Guru who has realized the truth, will instruct you in the respective knowledge. Next question. What are the qualifications of a teacher? The answer: the two main qualifications essential for a fully useful teacher of the spiritual path are, firstly, perfect knowledge of scriptural literature, and secondly, complete subjective experience of the infinite reality. In short, the one who is a Tattvabodha. The last question for the day. What is prana and what are the 5 types of prana? And the answer is, the term prana indicates the various physiological functions in a living body. The types of prana are, the first one, the function of respiration called prana. 2, the function of excretion called apana. 3, the function of digestion and assimilation called samana. 4, the function of blood circulation called YANA. And the 5th one is the function of involuntary reverse actions, as well as the capacity in a living creature to improve himself in his mental outlook and intellectual life, called Bodha. Thank you. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah. Thank you, sir.
Friends, as announced earlier, the slide with the bank details shall be displayed for your reference. This being purely voluntary, if you desire to contribute, do respond early to enable us offer 100% of receipts as Guru Dakshina to our Gurus. I would like to express a hearty thanks to Mamta Madam for chanting and explaining the divine mantra, Dr. Timmappa Hegde sir for the introduction and emphasizing important aspects in today's topics, Dr. Rekha for her excellent presentation, strengthened with wonderful slides. And importantly, our hearty thanks to all the participants for joining us today. Thanks to Dr. Rupa and Dr. Indumati for bringing us a wonderful teaching quiz, educative. This brings us to the end of today's class. On Monday, the 25th, we will be back with the next session of Disha. But before that, on coming Friday, the 22nd, let us meet at 6:45 p.m. local time for our 107th session of verse-by-verse study of Bhagavadgita. We shall continue from verses 8 to 12 of Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga, Bhagavadgita chapter 14. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.